Okay, so I'm moving into paragraph 734 to 747. So we're talking about Answer to Job by C.G. Jung, published by Princeton University Press, and Transformation of the God Image and Elucidation of Jung's Answer to Job by Edward Edinger, edited with foreword by Lawrence Jaffe. The basic theme is the differentiation and transformation of the God image in history, the evolution of the psyche. And the basic idea, Job's encounter with Yahweh, is followed by an activation of the collective unconscious by virtue of Job's profound conscious insight into the nature of the deity. In other words, Job realizing that God has a good side and a bad side. And the God image feels obliged to move closer to humankind. What we're talking about, the God image here, is the deepest archetype in the unconscious, which when it's constellated starts to come through into consciousness. And it's coming out of the depths of the deep unconscious, so some or all can see it. And so what we're seeing in Job and John of Patmos here in Revelation is now actually seeing that. Also Ezekiel and Daniel and many others that were seeing the God image. See, the God image is most basic archetype, the deepest layer. The basic objective of the psyche overall is to fulfill this constellated archetype. Now, one thing for those who may not be fully familiar with Dr. Jung's work, when archetypes are constellated, they're going to play through into consciousness all the way through. And in the process of what Dr. Jung was saying, he discovered the reality of the self, the God image. It's also called the transpersonal self. And that's the deepest unconscious archetype. And so when that gets constellated, then it's going to play through and we're going to get everything. All right, so we have to remember now, paragraph 734, Dr. Jung was writing in the early days of the Cold War, when apocalyptic terrors were palpably close. He died before the Cuban Missile Crisis. He comments about his worry about a herostratic head. Now, Herostratus was a king of the Ephesus area in, I think the year was something like 325 BC, and he destroyed the temple of Artemis, or the temple of Diana, which was one of the seven wonders of the ancient world. Actually, it was one of the seven wonders of the world, and this fellow destroyed it because at least he would be famous and be remembered in history because he destroyed this temple. And here we are, 2,500 years later, talking about the guy and his destructive nature. And it makes me wonder who else has such attitudes today. And so Dr. Jung is talking about the fact that humanity, through our logos now and through the scientific method, has gotten to the point where we've knotted the hangman's noose on ourselves. And another way of saying it is that the possibility of thermonuclear war is the potential for the wrath of God to destroy all life on the planet. And so I'll just, I have a quote here from Dr. Jung from his interview with the BBC. And I don't think I can say it quite as well as he did, but you can type into YouTube "The World Hangs by a Thin Thread, Jung," and you can actually see him saying it. But I'll read it to you here. The world hangs on a thin thread, and that is the psyche of man. Nowadays, we are not threatened by elementary catastrophes. There is no such thing as an H-bomb. That is all man's doing. We are the great danger. Psyche is the great danger. What if something goes wrong with the psyche? And so it is demonstrated to us in our days what the power of the psyche is of man, how important it is to know something about it, but we know no thing about it. Interestingly, the way he said that on the video made me understand what the word actually means. We know no thing. We know no thing about it. Nobody would give credit to the idea that the psychical processes of the ordinary man have any importance whatever. One thinks, oh, he is just what he has in his head. It is all from his surroundings. He is taught such and such a thing, believes such and such a thing, and particularly if he is well housed and well fed, then he has no ideas at all. That's the great mistake, because he is just that which he is born, and he is not born as a tabula rasa, but as a reality. So that was from the interview face-to-face with Carl Jung, which is available in its entirety on YouTube. And so you can see how apocalyptic Dr. Jung was thinking in the years before his death. I think this interview was about 1958. So paragraph 735, John may not have known about the double aspect of God from Job's time. And Dr. Jung comments on how little people reflect on numinous objects and attempt to come to terms with them. I'm giving you here two links because I think a lot of people do not understand what a numinous event is, or a religious experience, how it is experienced. It so happens that I caught two such events on video since I began doing these videos 2 years ago. It's June 1st, it'll be 2 years since I've been doing this project. And it just so happened that I caught two that related to me. I was going to play one of them during this session. I may do, if we still have time, at the end. But otherwise, there is a playlist on the channel called Breakthroughs to the Unconscious. And there's actually about 10 videos on that playlist. And the first of them relates to my reading of paragraphs 746 to 747 of Answer to Job, and a synchronous event that to this day I'm totally blown away by. And if you haven't watched that video, please go find it. The thumbnail for that video has a picture of the Navy's Blue Angels on it. And that's because a flyover of 4 F-18s happened at just the right moment when I was reading those paragraphs, so that it had quite a numinous effect on me, and it still does. I'm still choking up about it, even right now. And I'll try to play it here at the end, but I'm not going to go to it right now. So when we have things of belief, it involves our affectivity, so it's difficult to have absolute objectivity about things. So, I can be emotional about my event with the flyover of the jets, and but I can't look at it objectively as you can. And so I'm not expecting you to be as numinously affected as I am. I'm only giving you those two links so that you can see what I'm talking about. Whether you agree that those are numinous events or not is a different issue. And so, let's see. So anyway, Dr. Jung was saying doubt is felt to be very disagreeable. Preference is not to analyze an object of belief, no belief. And so the same is true for atheists or agnostics. They don't want to analyze their position either because they don't want to admit their deficit. And they find it hard to admit numinosity. But one thing I would urge upon you is to look for the video on our channel about Bill Wilson and Alcoholics Anonymous, because Bill Wilson did have, Bill Wilson and his friend Roland both had religious experiences, having had interaction with Dr. Jung at great distance. Bill Wilson never met Dr. Jung, but Roland did. And Bill Wilson did write to Dr. Jung late in his life, though, to tell him how what he had said to Roland, who was an analysan, had affected his life and had, in effect, caused the beginning of Alcoholics Anonymous. So Dr. Jung is talking about enlightenment here. It's not Buddhist enlightenment. He says religious points of faith are all moonshine. And agnostics don't possess any knowledge of God, but his point is that we are possessed by metaphysical events, not, we don't possess it, it possesses us. And he made the comment that after 35, he didn't know of anyone that achieved a cure from analysis who didn't reestablish a religious connection to the transpersonal self, to the self, the God image. Leaving aside now, of course, metaphysical God, which Dr. Jung did not address. So Dr. Jung asks these difficult questions: who and what are reason, and why is some reason supreme? Beware of the factor of superior reason. And this goes to his issue that we need to challenge the spirits. We need to test the spirits, because we also get spiritual advice from the wrong side of the tracks also. And we need to make a conscious judgment. This is what individuation is today. And we need to make moral judgments in our own case. So we have to consider religious experience and statements in their entirety. So then in paragraph 736, he comments that the Christian achievement is the creation of the good God. Okay, so I think by that he's talking about the Logos and the idea that rationality did start to enter into humanity at that time. But what Revelation anticipates is the enantiodromia. And so in the 20th century, not so much. It's become burningly topical, and even today. And so we have to make our own contribution to the discussion. These are not issues that were decided 2,000 years ago. The continuing incarnation is up to you and to me, and we have to bear witness to the truth as well as we can see it. Okay, so paragraph 737 now. What is the relationship of this man, John of Patmos, to God? How does he endure the contradiction? He makes the point that apocalyptic dreams and visions are now common. And one of the big issues he's raising here is that John was likely a man highly respected in his community at the time, and he was near death. And he said that when people are near death, they tend to be able to see centuries forward and backward in their visions and in their dreams. And this seems like one of those visions. And so in 738 now, he says that psychology must speak about the paradoxical nature of God. And about conflicts of duty. He says from the doctor's point of view, from the analyst's point of view, they take a wait and see what the psyche produces. Now, keep in mind that when there's a conflict in your psyche, the point is that a dream or a vision will emerge, which will produce a conjunctio, or bringing these conflicts together. But, very painful examples of this would be Sophie's Choice, which was a movie with Meryl Streep years ago, and the decision of abortion that some women have to make. And that obviously is a very painful decision. I do happen to know one woman who had three abortions for various reasons, at least one or two of them demanded by her father, and then the result of all those abortions was she never was able to have children, which was tragic, and so we often have conflicts of duty. Our abortion debate in the United States really begs the question, because there will be abortions. There were horrible abortions before it became legalized and done, at least medically, and that's the paradoxical nature of God right there, and on the good side and the evil side. And it seems to me that each person has to make that choice for themselves. But anyway, symbols of the reconciling and unitive nature do in fact turn up in dreams and fairy tales. And so these conflicts of duty, a symbol is presented that solves that conflict of duty in the psyche. Whether you follow it or not is a different question, which I don't propose to address here. Okay, so there's a footnote. Psychologically, the God concept includes every idea of the ultimate, of the first and last, of the highest and lowest. The name makes no difference. So that was Dr. Jung's footnote. Stephanie says, the problem of the logos in narrative is that it thinks it is God. God is a trinity. Logos can't represent the entirety of a people's psychic or image potencies. The psyche of nature and nature of psyche is reflected in the image of the feminine. Yeah, and she goes on, it is my sense that, seen archetypally, one must change modes, leave the rational mode for a poetic sense of mind. This is Hillman's insight, that there is a poetic basis in mind for reality. Over the last few months, Stephanie, I've come up with a slightly different way of saying that, which is that the the logos isn't alive. There's no life in the logos. The logos is slicing and dicing, and so everything that you read, everything that you learn growing up or go to college to study, unless you have an empirical experience, maybe in the laboratory, it's all words, and there's no life there, and so it's the distinction is not really logos and eros per se. It's logos versus life, and you can go all the way up to being a PhD and being able to spout back all the words, all the nice words that whoever you were studying taught you over the years, but then you have to go out and live your life, and living your life means that you have to put blood in it, and what Dr. Jung found, and you're referring to here, is that through creativity, through poetry and other things, we can start to see how things relate to one another, and there's a lot of poetry out there. So I won't read any poetry here today, but you can see the relatedness of things, and that is where we're going to have new common sense emerging. Yes, we need logos. There's no doubt that we do. We use logos to educate our young and to educate ourselves, but then we have to bring experience, the experience of life, into it by some means, whether it's through poetry or through movies or through writing a novel, or by even doing a video about Dr. Jung's oeuvre over YouTube. I mean, that's what I'm doing, which is a creative function. It's an experience. I'm experiencing how you are interacting with me, and I'm bringing to your attention certain ways that I think about these things, and you can then test it yourself within your own psyche to decide whether it makes sense or not. Miles says, I had a numinous experience when the hand of a suffragette named Irene Parlby struck me up aside the head. She is a statue, and I wasn't looking, and it struck my head. There's a message to me from her. that does sound numinous, Miles. Especially if you were being anti-feminist at the moment. Stephanie says, logos is a reference for a fantasy image. Let's see. One does not have to write poetry at all. One must think poetically. And I think when we're talking about dreams and visions, that is what is happening. And, for those of you that might need more logos, let's think about how this happened. Okay, in the human psyche, certainly before maybe 5,000 years ago, there was almost no writing. I mean, there are apocryphal stories that I learned in college that said that the Chinese had an encyclopedia about 5,000 years BC. Yeah, maybe. I don't know. Not many people read it, obviously, because we didn't have printing presses at that time. And so in all the millions of years before that, in every species, the psyche was presenting messages to the conscious mind of whatever creature. And so it was presenting danger. It was presenting images of danger, and that's one of the key points in Dr. Jung's oeuvre, obviously, is that we all think in images. And so you can imagine that an image of a big cat, for example, would be an image of danger. These days I get that image in the form of a police car every time I'm near a speed trap, and you've probably heard me tell that story before. But in any case, the way our psyche works is to present us with images. And even, when you're going to sleep, sometimes you'll have a start like you feel like you're falling. You feel like you're falling out of a tree. Well, in our deep ancestry, there were great apes who were living in trees, and they had to sleep, and they had to have this reflex that if they started to fall off the branch, they would grab on. And that reflex that you feel is from that. Let's see. Right, and Stephanie says dreams and visions are poetic expressions, as is daydreaming. Yeah, absolutely. And let's see. Freaky Bro says it does seem that dreams and visions and sensations from my subconscious mind are much more tilted toward the eros than the logos. Well, it is in that I guess that's the point I'm trying to make, is that those images are communicating through images, so they're actually communicating through your life, through your living self. Anyway, Grace says they also seem to be more active in the right side of your brain, which is considered to be more creative. I don't doubt that, and that's something we more have to learn more about. Certainly, I have for many years, for 25 years, I only listen to the telephone on my left side, so that my reaction to what's coming in on the telephone comes into my right brain. And I notice that there is a qualitative difference when I put the phone to my right side and hear it through my left brain. I tend to be much more logical when I hear things in my left brain than my right brain. You might want to test this. I mean, I think a lot of people haven't ever noticed that, but if you ever paid attention to me over the last 25 years, you would see that I'm always putting the phone to my left ear, or if I'm, even this morning I was doing it in the state of Maryland, we're not allowed to use a headset in both ears, only in one ear. And I invariably put the headset into my left ear. And I believe that gives me more creative responsiveness to the conversation, and less logos. But I think it gives me a more holistic response to the phone call. You need to cultivate that image that I always have. I no longer need I never needed a radar detector, because I always know I get a vision every time there's police activity near me.